Here we go.
We should have a full team, hopefully. You change the background?
Yeah. It's outside the locker room. Outside the locker room.
Which one? At the dry dock?
Yeah, here we go. Good morning, everybody. It is Sunday morning, the 18th of February. We are here, Draught Nite Sports, CJ and me, to talk about, or Casey and me, what am I talking? To talk about what do we call it? We're the debates that start at the bar, finish on our air with us. We have a lot to get over today. We're going to put a cap on the Super Bowl. We're going to talk a little bit about Hall of Fame and my problems with Hall of Fame. And then we're going to get into Big East basketball. What?
And I have several problems with the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, well, mine are a little specific.
Maybe more that can take up a half hour's worth of discussion.
Well, we'll see what happens. But all right, so first of all, how's your weekend been so far?
It's been excellent as a UConn basketball fan. It might be one of the best weekends we've had since the men's team won the championship last year.
Yeah, they did put a show on yesterday against Marquette, which is probably their biggest challenge. But we're going to get to that a little bit later in the show. I went to see the Bob Marley movie, like I told you before we came on the air, and I enjoyed it, and I recommend it highly. If you're a music fan, a rock and roll fan, it tells a pretty good story. Good crowd in the theater yesterday for a matinee. I went at 2:00, and it was pretty much 2/3 of the way full, which I was impressed with. And actually, I know they make fun of people who do it, but at the end, a lot of people were clapping. So like it hit kind of a note with a lot of people. Not to make a music kind of analogy, but it worked that way.
Yeah, anyways, clapping at a movie, it's kind of weird.
It is, because they're not there.
Exactly. Who's appreciating the applause?
Yeah, exactly. So let's get into it. We're not going to get too much into the Super Bowl. It's a week old. It's been covered ad nauseum all week long. The couple of things I do want to get into about last week's Super Bowl. I thought it was a very good game. Any game that goes into overtime in a championship game, it's like the seventh game in the World Series going to the ninth inning. It's like, the hockey going to, overtime, or basketball. It's just a drama you can't beat. The big thing that I came out of with, two big mistakes by the 49ers that really hurt them. The
opening drive fumble. The opening drive fumble.
That's three. That's three, because there's the fumble on the punt, and then there's the missed extra point. They changed the whole complexion of the game. Right. But it looks, and you said it last week. You picked Kansas City
in a walk-off, right?
I picked them
in a walk-off, but I said field goal, so I was awfully close. I also seem to remember you picked the Niners.
I did.
We should have put some money on it.
I did. Well, I'll buy you a beer at trivia night.
Thank you.
Anyway, so Mahomes now, he was already in rarefied air, but I think now he's transcended above football. He gets it. To me, he's starting to remind me of Tiger Woods, how he was early in his career on a Sunday where you felt like he was unbeatable. Michael Jordan. I mean, Brady was always great in terms of football, but it was always Brady and Belichick. It was always Brady. There seemed to be more facets to what was going on. Now, it's Mahomes. What do you think about it?
I totally agree. I mean, look what's happened to his skill position players that he's lost over the years. I mean, some of his wide receivers, it's hard to remember that Rice, I think, is one guy who I just learned his name maybe a few weeks ago, and I think he's the top wide receiver. The guy who caught the winning touchdown in overtime, McCall Hardman, they had given him to the Jets.
Who couldn't find a way to use him.
Yeah, well, I think Aaron Rodgers wanted him, which turned out to be a mistake because they gave him right back to the Chiefs. So, the receivers are not household names, I would say, except, of course, for the terrific tight end Kelsey. But, we've said this over the last couple of podcasts, how terrific this Mahomes guy is. He's amazing. I mean, he was a magician before this game, and he just he just went above and beyond again. Even his running backs. I mean, there's no household names back there. They don't have a Christian McCaffrey or even a Saquon Barkley.
Nah.
They've got the kid from Rutgers.
Yeah, he's becoming a household name. But I mean, it is. It is. And the other thing about it, it's just the way he performed. It's like you sat there, and if there's time on the clock, it's never safe. And that's one of the other subject I want to get into is people made a big deal about the coin toss, and I think it went overboard. I think when you're playing against Patrick Mahomes, I don't think there's a coin toss is the big reason you lose or win. It's a fact of the matter is you have to come up with a stop against him. And, I think the defense of the Niners, even though they lost Greenlaw, a big piece of their defense.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah. But championship
How he got
defenses. Hurt? Oh, yeah, I know. Well, that's the field. That's a subject for another day, and I would love to get it. It's funny how, and I don't want to get off our tangent and doing our tangent right here, right now, but what drives me crazy about watching sports, and I don't know if you remember this a few years ago, it happened basically a lot in baseball, where it seemed that every star had a quad injury. And now this year, how many people have gone down with Achilles? It seemed like it's almost like a flu. I mean, how many guys, you start with Rodgers on opening night to now, I mean, how many guys have gone down with Achilles? And we see a lot of it over the last few years. And I think it has something to do with the field. I think they should look into the fields. And, they've got that new spongy field thing and, things like that. But I find it strange that we have this rash of Achilles injuries where guys don't seem to be really doing much. And they're snapping their Achilles.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not even sure. And it's certainly not just happening in football. I mean, over the last couple of weeks, I've heard two instances of two men playing racket sports that have torn their Achilles, which is going to make me be even more cautious when I resume my pickleball play this week. Yeah. Because especially at the age that we're at.
Oh yeah,
I don't want to be going crazy pivoting and trying to sprint to get to a ball when it's just a pickleball.
Yeah, it's weird. It's just weird. It's a strange thing, an occurrence, and I don't know if it's for them. When you look at athletes, I would look at the training methods, then I would look at the fields they're on and say, why is this happening? It makes no sense for an Achilles to snap. This many Achilles to snap like that.
Right. Joe, even one of the UConn lady basketball players before the season. The Egyptian girl, El Alfi, I think it's pronounced, or El Afai. I'm not sure how she pronounces it because I haven't heard her on the court yet. She tore her Achilles playing for Egypt in a tournament before the season started. And she's one of the 5 that have missed the entire season. And she's an 18-year-old girl who tore her Achilles playing basketball, which she can do in her sleep.
Right.
It's just amazing how often this is happening these days.
Yeah. So it's something they should really look into because, the ACL, they seem to have gotten a handle on. It usually takes about a year, but the knee injuries, they seem to be able to bring them back. The Achilles is a different. I mean, you see Kobe Bryant ruined his career. You've seen, a lot of players, they're never the same people when they come back because you lose that explosiveness. But I don't want to get off track with that too much. I want to get back to what I was going to talk to you about, which is the coin toss and the defense. I mean, I think the biggest thing, and they got a lot of credit, was the Chiefs defense could make the stops. The San Francisco defense, for all that talent they have, and we talked about Chase Young not really measuring up last week, and they couldn't make the stop. I mean, you got to know Patrick Mahomes is going to I know it's almost impossible to defend him, but when he ran up the middle for that 30-yard gain, there's nobody there. The game. Yeah. There's nobody there. I mean, and I don't care. You can sit there and go, the coin toss, but I mean, I think people are looking too much at it.
Well, you can't say it was in retrospect, you could say it was the wrong choice because they lost the game, but it made sense when you heard Shanahan's explanation the next day. Just the fact that they could possibly get the ball twice in overtime, it made sense.
Yeah.
Well, would you think it's a crapshoot, and we ran into the same thing a couple weeks ago with who's the Lions coach, Campbell?
Yeah.
Dan Campbell? Yeah. With his going for twice on 4th and 2. There's two sides of every story.
I
And
know.
from what the Niners said after the game, it made sense. Either way, you can't argue with the decision either way.
All right, let's put a cap on this. I want to give one last subject here. We know now that Andy Reid, I mean, early in his career, he was known as can't win the big one, Andy. Now that has been taken off his resume. He's going to go down as one of the greatest coaches of all time. He probably was before he won Super Bowls, but now he surely is in the pantheon of great coaches. But Shanahan now seems to be running into what Andy Reid ran into in the early 2000s when he was with the Eagles, getting to championship games, getting to a Super Bowl, not being able to get the job done. How
Like Marv Levy.
Yeah, and Marv Levy, even worse, Marty Schottenheimer, who couldn't even get to a Super Bowl. So it's like, how important is it for Shanahan to win it within the next few years? When you think about McVay's won one, Reed's won multiple, even Doug Peterson, who's now in Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence, and he should be able to challenge. How important do you think it is for Shanahan to win one within the next couple of years? Because remember, keeping this team together is going to be hard too.
Yeah. I mean, with the team he puts on the field, as we've said before, and their offense, it's just so formidable with skill position players that outclass probably any other team as a group. So now is their time. I would say if they lose again next year, if they don't with the same personnel, barring any unforeseen circumstances like bad injuries or anything like that, I think next year is do or die for him.
I agree.
The team is just too talented to not win at least one Super Bowl during this time.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
I totally agree because this is like, he's been to the Super Bowl twice. He's been to 5 consecutive NFC championships. And I mean, and he's come away with no ring. I mean, it's one of those things where you got to start looking at him and going, well, there's something missing. There is something missing. Maybe he's the kind of guy who has to, although he's one of the most brilliant, it seems to be one of the most brilliant play callers of all time. Maybe he's taking on too much with that. Maybe he needs to train somebody to call the plays. He's got Brian Greasy on the sidelines. He can have input on it, but maybe he should start looking at both sides of the ball. Maybe he's not concentrating enough on the defensive side of the ball. I remember I used to get mad when, around here, like people put Rex Ryan on a pedestal, but Rex Ryan only worried about the defensive side of the ball. He didn't care what was going on in offense. Maybe Shanahan has the same problem. And if you're the head coach, you're responsible for all 3 facets of the game.
Yeah. So, you're definitely held responsible for it. So yeah, I mean, he's the guy bringing in the coordinators and the assistants and all. So it's all on him.
Yeah. So
So
I think
he's got to do it next year for sure.
Yeah. So I think that for sure. And, sorry. So I brought this up a couple weeks ago. I don't know if anybody will remembering it, but it was the Hall of Fame and my problem with Marvin Miller being in the Hall of Fame, which I really still will stick to. I never went to a baseball game to watch him negotiate a player's contract. So stop it. Anyways, let's talk about the Hall of Fame. So, I mean, I think all of them have shadows over them, the way they're chosen. I mean, as we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, a guy goes away for 7 years. How is he suddenly a Hall of Famer when he hasn't been on the field for 7 years? Let's get it. You go ahead. Let's start with your thing and what your problem is for Hall of Fame.
Well, first of all, I do disagree with you in your thought of not allowing executives and anybody involved in baseball who's not actually on a playing field with a glove on or a mitt. I think guys like Marvin Miller, who's so instrumental in changing baseball and creating free agency, which is pretty much a dominant theme these days. I think they merit inclusion. Certainly managers. I mean, GMs who've acquired the right team to win championships year after year. It's looking at the Yankees, of course, because they have the best history. How do you not include Joe McCarthy, who won double-digit World Series? Miller Huggins, who had same thing and had the best team in history, the 27 Yankees. Ed Barrow, the GM who assembled those players. They're just as instrumental in in putting a winning team on the
But-
field as the players contributing with their hitting and pitching.
But remember Ed Barrow.
But go ahead.
But remember Ed Barrow, that he was part of, I don't know, I'm not saying he was guilty of it, but GMs at that time were not the Branch Rickies giving Negro players a chance to play. They could have been heroes and brought some of those guys in the 20s and 30s into the game and maybe made the game more exciting earlier. I
Understood, but you can hold, and it's a terrible thing that it didn't happen until 1947, but unfortunately that was the way of the country, and it wasn't just baseball, was it? I mean,
right.
it was football. I mean, look at basketball. Look how long it took to incorporate African Americans into basketball, which is it's all ridiculous.
But
so
I mean, it's like,
you can hold the GMs back in the 20s and 30s accountable, but they were on the same boat.
What about Charlie Kaminsky, who owned the White Sox and was terrible to his players? I mean, he treated them worse than anybody, and he's in the Hall of Fame. I
was going to ask you that. He is in the Hall of Fame? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's in the Hall of Fame. I mean, you can make him, Kennesaw Mountain Landis as the commissioner of baseball. Yeah, he did a lot of things to bring back after the Black Sox scandal, but he was also somebody who was known for being semi-racist and stuff. I mean, he had some problems in his background. I mean, to me, Marvin Miller should not be in the Hall of Fame if Curt Flood is not. Curt Flood actually gave up his career and fought for these guys. If you talk about the seminal players in baseball who have made changes, of course you put Babe Ruth up there. Of course you put Jackie Robinson up there. But if you talk about players' rights, the man who fell on his sword for baseball players was Curt Flood. And Curt Flood was at the time an all-star level player. I mean,
yeah, I don't disagree with that.
I mean,
I don't know if he deserves a plaque. He certainly deserves mention in the Hall of Fame, but he doesn't necessarily have to be in the Hall of Fame wing with his own plaque. Yeah,
but actually,
being that we're on this subject, Joe, you know what has always bothered me? I don't think Larry Doby gets enough credit. The Indians back in 47 called him up. I think it was June or July, just a month or two after Jackie. And here he is facing the same racism, the same taunts, the same prejudice from a whole different set of teams and players and fans, right, and media and everything else as Robinson. He was in the other league. So Robinson gets all the credit. Not that it's not deserving for Robinson, but I think Doby deserves more credit too. He went through the same path.
I think the problem with Larry Doby is, even though at that time Cleveland was a very, very good team, I mean, I think he was on two teams for Cleveland that made it to the World Series.
Right. One of which they won in 48 and lost in 54.
Right. So, I mean, you could say he was a big contributor to Cleveland becoming a good team. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you think back, we can get in, this could be a fun conversation for our future, because if you think back about how many championships the Yankees might not have won if they had to play in the second level of playoffs against Cleveland or Boston or Detroit.
They still would have won.
You drank that Kool-Aid too long ago. Anyways, but I agree with you, Larry Doby doesn't. But I think that why Jackie got more, he was in Brooklyn at the time. You had the New York press, you had the New York media. Yeah. You didn't have,
and he was nothing. And he was the first,
right? And it was nothing. I mean, outside of, I would say, you had the major hubs of baseball at that time were New York, Chicago, and St. Louis. Cleveland kind of fell in the middle of that triangle and got lost. Yeah. I mean, so I mean, I think that hurt him a lot more than anything else.
You're right, but along those lines, so Branch Rickey obviously gets a ton of credit for doing what he did. Bringing Jackie up, signing him for the AAA team in Montreal, and then bringing him up to Brooklyn. I think the next year or whatever.
Bill Beck.
Can you even say who the Cleveland GM was that brought in Doby?
I think Bill Beck was running the Cleveland Indians at the time. I think he was the owner, Bill Beck. Okay. There's a great documentary on his son I saw a couple of months ago that was really good. And he talked about, I mean, Bill Beck he's one of those guys, baseball historians, or if you've watched baseball or if you read a lot of baseball, he was a real important guy. Kind of a renegade, kind of a crazy man.
He was, absolutely.
Sent a midget up to bat.
Eddie Goodell.
Yeah, he did a lot of different things. Even when he took over the White Sox years later, I mean, he had a shower out in the outfield for his fans. I mean, he's
Fireworks.
yeah, he was a show. Well, yeah, and then his son
Disco
came up with
night.
this. That was his son's idea, and his son got run out of baseball because of it.
Oh,
But,
really?
yeah, so I'll look for the documentary so you can watch it. It's really good because that guy now owns baseball teams with Bill Murray, and it's really funny and how he made a comeback. But anyways, the Hall of Fame. There's always going to be I don't say mistakes, but players we can disagree with, and especially now the steroid era that's coming up, and they got to start. I don't know. What do you think about the steroid boys?
I think because there's so much that's unknown. You don't know. I mean, some guys definitely did it, but there's more, obviously.
Well,
Uh, with that unknown quantity, I think you got to let the guys in. I mean, don't you think guys like Clemens and Bonds, Barry Bonds and A-Rod, I mean, wouldn't they be Hall of Famers even without the steroids? And weren't they on that path to the Hall of Fame before they started taking this stuff?
And that's the thing. That's what makes them harder to worry about because in retrospect, like you said, they were going to the Hall of Fame. They didn't have to cheat.
Right.
I feel when you talk about the Brady Andersons of the world, I go, okay, that was his one shot at a big contract. I understand why he cheated that 1 year. He was trying to get his contract. These guys were getting paid millions of dollars or they were on the top of echelon of paid players. So there was no reason for them to cheat, and still they cheated. And there's no, and they don't. None of them have come out and been apologetic about it. None of them come out and say mea culpa. None of them has shared with us why they did it. I think if they could, I watched Joe Buck does a podcast himself now, and he had Pete Rose on, and I was looking at Pete Rose, and Pete Rose came so close to getting my sympathy, except he still is unapologetic about it. It's like,
right.
At least say, I screwed up. I had a gambling problem. He actually turned it around. He had me this close, and he starts going, I don't know why. Baseball is still judging me if gambling is now legal. Why can't I go bet on a football game? Why can't I go bet? It's like, okay, fine. And you learn no lesson. You admitted you're an absolute rampant gambler who can't control himself. Why should I feel sorry for you? You and I remember Pete Rose. There was no bigger player in the 70s than Pete Rose. Pete Rose was the ambassador of baseball. I mean, he was put up on a pedestal where fathers were telling their kids, this is the guy you want to be like. Look at him. He doesn't have a ton of athletic talent, but he gets the most out of everything. He hustles everywhere. He tries for every ball. Nothing is out of his range. That was what was told to like middle of the road ball players.
Right.
Look at Pete Rose. Emulate his game.
He's a special case. Obviously, he's a head case.
Yeah.
But with the steroid guys, I mean, these guys were just so driven. I mean, I've read a little about it lately, and Bonds was just so dedicated to becoming the best baseball player in history. And he saw other guys taking performance-enhancing drugs, and he said, that's giving them an advantage. I don't want them to catch up to me or surpass me as the greatest player in baseball. So I'm just going to do what everybody else is doing. See, that was his life, and you could see, A-Rod and Clemens had the same bulldog mentality. Well, they wanted to be the best, and they didn't want anyone to have an advantage that they couldn't also take, that they couldn't also have.
See, I heard a different take on it, and I'm not sure because everything is speculation. You don't know unnamed sources, all this stuff where they get this stuff. Right. But I heard that Bonds' problem was the fact that he got mad because he thought Ken Griffey Jr. was getting too much credit and being better than him. He thought Ken Griffey Jr. was, because he was surly. Ken Griffey had that big smile. Ken Griffey was the kind of guy everybody loved. You wanted to, you admired Griffey. You loved the way he played. He got along with the press. The press loved him. So Barry Bonds, I heard, and maybe just speculation, said, well, if they don't love me, don't respect me, they don't respect me for being myself, I'll just put up numbers that no one can match, and they'll have to respect me.
I'm sure he had a lot of arguments, in his head in favor of doing what he did.
Yeah.
And it just bothersome that I don't like Barry Bonds. Never have. We
I,
thought it obviously tremendous player, but I never really liked his
I think
persona and personality.
all
But
three of them are unsympathetic.
yeah, well, it's funny how A-Rod has changed a bit since he's
Oh, he's
retired.
so phony. Don't even give me that.
Okay, you're such an anti-Yank guy. That's why you're
No,
saying
I am an anti-Yankite, but I don't even. We're going to get to something in a minute about this one because Joe Beningo on the phone on the radio yesterday was big on having A-Rod's number retired.
no. It's enough with the retired numbers. It's enough.
Yes.
Paul,
I mean,
Paul
yeah,
O'Neill should not have his number retired.
I
Paul
know.
O'Neill was a very good player for the Yankees, but
Well, then Bernie shouldn't.
Bernie should. Bernie's in the top 5 of every statistic of in their history.
Bernie was homegrown. I'll give you Bernie was homegrown too. I think that
right.
also should count with even though the Mets just retired Keith Hernandez's number. It should count.
And they're going to retire 2 former Yankees numbers too. Strawberry and Goodman.
But their best years were with the Mets. Anyways,
maybe they should do Cone too.
Yeah, and Cone had his best year with the Mets.
Yeah.
20-4. They never should let him go.
So to this point, is it just Seaver?
Hernandez. It's Seaver, Hernandez, Casey
Carter?
Stengel. Carter has not been retired. Carter has not been retired yet. Kuzman was Willie Mays. They did Kuzman. They did. I don't know why they did Willie Mays.
They did Kuzman.
Yeah, they did Kuzman last year.
They should do Nolan Ryan's number 30.
He was on. There's another one they should have kept. We can go into another. We can do 3 hours on the players the Mets should have kept and what the out of difference would have been. But anyways, getting back to
40. They have 42 retired too. Of course.
Yeah, getting back to the Hall of Fame and the retired numbers. I mean, isn't it? It becomes almost like I don't know, just like the Super Bowl halftime show. It's there, but I don't care about it anymore. They make you not want to care about it.
Actually,
I think
when
you're talking about players going into the Hall of Fame, and I'll even put, like you said, Clemens, Bonds, and A-Rod before they did their cheating or their enhancements, shall we say, were on their way to the Hall of Fame. They were going to be, no doubts, Hall of Famers. There was going to be no doubt about it. You know, I think when you look at a Hall of Famer, I think at some point in their career, they should have a 5 to 7 year stretch where they're the top 5 at their position.
Dominated the sport.
They don't have to dominate, but be in the top 5 at your position. No doubts about it.
And to be an all-star more than a handful of times.
Yes. Because we were just
at least be an all-star, right?
Look at us. I mean, remember Brooks Robinson, 18 straight All-Star games. Willie Mays, 24 straight All-Star games. Hank Aaron, 21 straight All-Star games. If you were the top of the top when we were growing up, it was almost like the All-Star game. You didn't need any voting because the same guys were going to be there every year. You might get two or three changes because of retirements or whatever, but for the most part, the same 20 players went from each league every year.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what it's become, and they're saying it's become the Hall of Very Good.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my biggest pet peeves, and this happened a while ago, was Don Sutton. Sutton pitched 23 seasons in big leagues. He made 4 All-Star teams. 4. Yeah. He won 20 games once, and back then 20 games meant something, because they had complete games and they didn't take you out after 100 pitches. He pitched for 6 teams. Obviously he did the most damage with the Dodgers, but then, I remember him on the Angels and the Brewers. He was an average pitcher his last several years. He was never his team's ace. And
he was known for scuffing the ball.
Yeah, there you go. Another strike against him. But he was never the best pitcher on his team. Granted, the Dodgers had some great pitching with Drysdale and Valenzuela and Claude Osteen for a little bit. But he was never the best pitcher on his own team, and he made it through longevity, is my feeling. He won 324 games over his 23 seasons, maybe 22 seasons. That averages out to like less than 15 wins a season.
Well, that's like Jim Cott. I actually met Jim Cott one day, so it's hard for me to say this. I was working for Federal Express at the time. He used to live in Madison, Connecticut, and I had to deliver a package to his house. And he was the nicest guy in the world. He actually talked to me for like 15 minutes just about baseball. And nicest guy in the world, but he's not in a Hall of Fame. He's not a Hall of Fame pitcher. He
But
had
he is. He got elected a couple of years ago, and again,
you know,
longevity, right?
yeah. If you look at his stats, okay,
He's an
first of all,
accumulator.
he spent most of the back end of his career as a middle relief pitcher, not even a closer. He was a middle relief pitcher, and he started out as a very good starting pitcher in the mid '60s.
Really good fielder too.
Yeah, but how many balls how many balls comes to the kid? I'm gonna pitcher a game. I mean, come
Enough
on.
to get him a lot of Gold Gloves.
But I looked it up. I think he'd make like 30 appearances and he'd have 30 assists and 3 putouts. And they gave him a Gold Glove because he didn't make an error. Although 30 balls came to him.
That's another topic we could attack is how do they award the Gold Gloves?
Yeah.
It's like the same guy wins it every year.
But I mean, I looked at Jim Cott's statistic and his average. If you take his average over a regular 162 game season, his record would be 13-11. 13-11, 2 games over 500.
And Sutton's not much better. I computed Sutton's average was 14 wins a season.
That's not Hall of Fame.
They're both accumulators. Neither one dominated during their era.
I mean, believe me, 20 years from now, with the way they do pitching now, 14 will seem like 25. But I mean, from what we saw growing up, no, they do not. Neither of them belong in the Hall of Fame. Jim Cott, if you want to put him as a broadcaster, because he was a very good broadcaster, I have no problem with that. But as a pitcher, no. It's just no.
And you know, I love. Obviously, been a Yankee fan for over 55 years. Messina does not deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
Who?
Messina finally won 20 games his last season.
No, I mean,
and again, back then that was an important stat.
I think
All-Star, but not a Hall of Famer.
I think you have to be recognized. I mean, you have to be I mean, look at. I mean, you have to be like the ace of your. I mean, you look at a staff. You have a staff like how many? I think a couple of things you got to look at is Cy Young awards. One, being in the top 3 of the Cy Young. How many times were you there in the top 3?
How many All-Star
teams? How many years could you actually be recognized as the ace of that staff?
Right.
I mean, those are the kind of things I would look at if I was voting. I would sit there and go, "Yeah, you're number 2 guy, but you're pitching against a number 2 or 3 guy on the other team." Also, sometimes you look at who they're beating. I mean, there are guys that were on teams that say, if you're in a division with, say you're on the St. Louis Cardinals and you're a very, very good pitcher and you get 10 starts a year, they're against the Pittsburgh Pirates, Cincinnati Reds. That should be 8 wins.
Right. So you're talking about somebody possibly like Adam Wainwright. So yeah. I don't even know if he retired. I know obviously Pujols is Wainwright coming back for one more year, or did he finally retire? Because he fits that description. He fits that description that you just put out there. So in another 5 years, he's going to be on the ballot. Todd Wainwright is not a Hall of Famer. We can have the discussion 5 years.
Another guy, and you can make your argument for him being in there. And I thought he was a very good pitcher, and it's not just to be an anti-Yankite here, but CC Sabathia feasted on the Baltimore Orioles for a long period of time. And I mean,
he's on the border. I'm not sure about him.
The one thing I will say, he has a Cy Young. He also pitched that last year with the Brewers. He put together a 6-week period that rivals almost anybody in baseball.
And he was dominant with the Indians. And he did help the Yankees win a World Series. And they signed him as a free agent.
But the whole thing is like I said, a lot of his stuff has to be taken under account. I think he was one of the guys. I will give him one thing over Pettit. First of all, I thought he was a more dominant pitcher than Pettit. I thought Pettit.
He was always the ace of his staff, no matter what team he was on.
Yeah,
Cleveland,
and I think Pettit was a secondary pitcher.
Yep.
Pitched well in the playoffs. I'll give him that.
Really well.
Not as. Yeah, but yeah, it's still he. I wouldn't call him one of the all-time players
I'm,
I've ever seen him in
I'm not
there.
putting him in, Joe. I'm not
Yeah,
putting Andy
yeah.
Pettit in the Hall of Fame.
I mean,
Even though he might have had the best pickoff move too.
yeah. But the other thing about him is like he pitched to such a high ERA, and you and I go back. I hate the new uh, statistics you have to go through where they break down the crap to. It's
Me
so
too.
easy. Wins. Here's what I still go by: innings
ERA.
pitched. Wins, losses, ERA, innings pitched, strikeouts. You got to be 75% more strikeouts than walks.
Well, that would exclude Nolan Ryan, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I know, but he's
in.
Yeah, he's
Well,
in there because
it's worse now. It's worse these days because all of these guys who are worthy, who have been accused or have admitted taking steroids, they're not eligible. So now all these secondary players are making it
because they feel they have to put somebody
Scott
in.
Rowland. What about Scott Rowland and Harold Baines? What the heck are they doing in the Hall of Fame?
They're not supposed to be there. They're not
Was
supposed
Scott Rowland
to be.
ever the best third baseman of his era? I don't think so. He was an all-star several times. He was great defensively.
He was a top 5 guy, but he still doesn't. He doesn't hit everything. I mean, I'll give you one. Everybody talks about Mazeroski, okay, and I agree, but and I didn't see him play. I can't say I saw him play, but everybody says he was one of the best defensive second basemen of all time.
That doesn't put him. That should not put him in. He doesn't hit that home run in Game 7 of the 1960 World Series. I don't think he's in.
Then why is Ozzie Smith in?
Because Ozzie Smith hit and he stole bases. Dude, Ozzie Smith must have hit 280. I'm assuming.
He
stole a lot of bases.
He only became no. I mean, I don't have it up in front of me, but I don't. Ozzie Smith, when he first came up, was known as a terrible hitter. He was a number 9 hitter. Right. He got better as it went on.
Lead off and number 2 hitter. He got better.
Yeah, he got better as it went on. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, he was known just for his defense for years. So it's kind of like I'll look it up and we'll go over it at trivia night. By the way, Wednesday night, Dry Dock. If you want to come down and see us live,
join the conversation.
Enjoying the conversation and this debate. It is going to be. I think that's where I kind of look at it and go, okay, so Ozzie's in, Mazeroski isn't. You're right. The only thing people remember
Mazeroski's in.
I know he is. They're in.
Be.
But the only thing you remember is him waving his hat around coming down third base. I mean, that's. But
he's a 250 hitter.
I know
with no power except for that one home run. How is that Hall of Fame worthy?
Well, I think that was put in by. First of all, you can't get the sports writers in there. I think that was the Veterans Committee put him in, and I think he was just well liked. You know, that's the problem. Yeah. And that's the problem with everything. With even in All-Stars now, I mean, it's kind of like, well, the All-Star games are just ridiculous. Did you watch any of the things going on this weekend?
I did. I kind of slept halfway through. I like the 3-point shooting contest. I saw a little of the dunk, but so this G Leaguer for the second year in a row won the slam dunk competition.
Yeah,
Mac McClurg, I think his name is.
Right.
He's not even in the NBA, but he's amazing. He's short. And he's white, and 2 years in a row they invited him this year because he won last year. But he was kind of amazing. I'm a little surprised that he's not in the NBA. Maybe he can't shoot worth a lick. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's something out there, and since he was undrafted, I don't think I don't know. Maybe because he was undrafted, it's harder to make it in the league. Or, like you said, maybe.
He's short and he probably doesn't have much of a shot. And he says he's incredible leaping ability. So he jumped over Shaq. Shaq was holding the ball like this over his head, and he leaped, grabbed the ball from Shaq, and slammed it in, I think, behind his back. So It's pretty incredible. So, yeah, I did catch a little of it, but it's overkill. And tonight's game, like we've said before, it's going to be like 200 to 198 because, it's all 3-point shots and slam dunks. So I don't know how much of that I'll be able to watch.
Right. All right. Let's just. I want to get. We're going to probably save a lot of this for next week, but I want to get into UConn basketball because right now the Big East. Next week we're going to do a lot of basketball, I believe, because we're getting into March Madness. But let's start it off with yesterday. UConn. I mean, it was almost hard to watch.
Not for me.
I know. Well, I like both teams. I've always had a little place in my heart for Marquette. I explained that to you weeks ago because of Al McGuire, and I liked that team back in the '70s when UConn didn't have a team to root for. And I like Shaka Smart, and I think he found a perfect place up there. But man, the difference between UConn and Marquette was stark. I mean,
They just dominated them.
It was like they had no answers. They had no answers at all. And when you
such a dominant, deep team, they're so balanced. You know, one of the broadcasters mentioned that a UConn player probably won't win Big East Conference Player of the Year because the team is just so balanced. How do you even choose from among the guys on the team?
Right.
Yeah, they're all averaging 15 points, and they all, close to between 5 and 10 assists, and they all rebound. Even, they got two big guards. No, they have all other guards are big. I mean, Castle's 6'6", right? And Cam Spencer, I think, is 6'5", and Tristan Newton 6'6". They all rebound. They're just such a deep and balanced team, and Marquette couldn't keep up with that. They shoot great everybody shoots from three except for the centers. They all play great defense, and Marquette wasn't nearly as deep. Kolek did not have a really good game. So it was no contest, especially they just blew them out in the second half.
When you think about the job that Hurley's done so far, Danny Hurley, and in such a short period of time, I remember it took a long time for Calhoun to really get his team as a national presence. They were starting to move it up. They went through the Big East. I mean, of course, when Calhoun took over, you had the big boys at Georgetown with Ewing, and you had, St. John's was good, very good back then. Nova was very good back then. Boston College, Syracuse was very good back. Pittsburgh was very good back then. It's a different Big East he's facing today. But it's kind of amazing. I mean, it's not like this team looks like it's going to be a one-time, one-shot. Yeah, we won it, and then we're going away. This team looks like it's here to stay, and he's bringing in talent, and he's reestablished Storrs, Connecticut, and anybody who comes from Connecticut will tell you, not the most attractive part of our state. And you're getting kids to come up who could be going to Florida, who could be going to USC or UCLA, who could be going to Tennessee, to LSU, to one of these attractive places where they'll be wearing shorts and T-shirts and girls in bikinis all year round. I mean, instead they're coming to Storrs, Connecticut, to what basically was an old cow farm.
Exactly. And that's what the campus was before it was a campus.
Yeah. And it's just, and he's gotten a tab with that. It took Calhoun years to get. Calhoun he actually had to start going overseas to places like Israel and Australia to start bringing his team up into the coming, to bring his team into national relevance, where Hurley seems to have no problem recruiting.
Well, I think everybody wants to play for him. I mean, he's really proven himself. His players love him, and he's a winner. I mean, he's taken several programs to heights unreached previously, and they want to play for him. And UConn's getting a lot of spotlight these days, a lot of exposure. They're getting NIL money. They're getting a lot of television appearances. So, like we said before, success breeds success. You want to play for a winner. You want to play for a team that you think is going to go fairly far in the tournament, and he's attracted them.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Gino and the women's program, Gino Auriemma, because obviously women have a terrific history. He has such a great history about him and his staff. And the players just keep flocking to this farm country to play for what's now known as the college basketball capital of the world.
Yeah, but Gino's a different story because it's been Gino from beginning to end. Danny Hurley really had he comes from Seton Hall. He comes from Jersey. He was up in Rhode Island. I mean, he'd been all around UConn, but he never played. He was a rival of UConn. To come in here, you would thought that Kevin Ollie, unfortunately, turned out to be not what we thought he was, but you would have thought Kevin Ollie would have had a better chance to continue the Calhoun success than a outsider. But, I mean, this kid, I mean, I think maybe he was the one who paid attention to. I mean, he's raised by a father who was one of the most successful high school, if not the most successful high school coach in American history, one of the most. And there seems to be a lot of his father in him. I've seen the documentaries on his father, and he seems to have a lot of his father's nuances around the game. And he brings an excitement, and he's young, and I see why it happened. But I just find it so interesting that he when you look at what Notre Dame's going through this year. I mean, Notre Dame fell on their face. I mean, you had a guy that was semi-successful. I mean, he never won the national championship, but he was there for 20-something years, and they were always an NCAA. Yeah, Bray in an NCAA tournament team.
You know where Notre Dame took him from when they hired him, right?
Wasn't he on Duke staff?
Delaware.
Oh, Delaware. Okay,
he was the head coach of Delaware.
Yeah, but he also comes from the Duke. He was a Duke assistant.
Right, he was Duke too. First, right? Yeah,
and he's a Maryland guy. I mean, didn't he come from the Maryland area? I think he was a DeMatha High boy. I think when he played. So yeah, you're right.
That's a powerhouse.
Yeah, I forgot he came from Delaware, but yeah, but I'm like, you watch all these other teams how they fall on their faces, and it's just like, wow, to get. I mean, what I watched yesterday, I mean, I thought Marquette had a good chance going in. They're not pull an upset, at least to take it deep.
They were number 4 in the country.
Yeah,
but, a lot's going to be proven in another week and a half when they play each other again up in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Yeah, UConn on the road. I mean, they're undefeated at home. I mean, certainly we didn't expect to win by 30 points yesterday, but when they go up to Madison, that's going to be interesting to see what happens in that game. Because if UConn wins handily again, I mean, why even hold the Big East tournament?
Right.
I agree. Yeah.
So, the one thing before we sign off for this week, because we're gonna next week we're gonna get into depths with the NCAA tournament. I was watching St. John's the other night against Providence, and I don't know how much you know about the quads. I
know you get credit for wins based on the how your opponents are ranked in what's your 4 quads.
Yeah,
right?
But
so depending on your opposition's records, they're placed in certain quads, and you get credit for within the quad for beating teams that are in there.
Also, there's a certain quad where you lose points for wins at home as compared to on the road.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but here's the deal. They're saying the Big East tournament is going to be held against St. John's because that's basically their home court. They're going to treat it is because
you have fans and students from other colleges buying tickets and coming to New York to watch the tournament. And again, with UConn, that's been their home away from home. All the fans that showed up when they beat St. John's there a couple weeks back. Yeah, they have a great following in New York.
Exactly, and I don't know how to measure it, but I'll guarantee you, Seton Hall's not that far away from the Garden either.
Right. It's a stone's throw.
So I mean, it's like, how do you measure that? I mean, I think it's one of those things where if it comes down, and I mean, Pitino's done a great job getting him so far. His team lacks a lot of stuff, but the fact of the matter is, if it comes down to that keeping them out of the NCAA tournament, it's ridiculous. Madison Square Garden is really nobody's arena. It like you said, UConn, it's their home away from home. St. John's, it's their home away from home.
It's the Knicks home.
Right. It is. That's it. It is not, the Knicks and the Rangers. It is not. Right. It doesn't have a college affiliation. I mean, so what you should not hold that against one team in terms of points. And it's another example of the NCAA being concerned about some things that nobody else is concerned about.
Yeah. Well, they won't have to worry about it if they win the Big East tournament.
No, true, but I mean, they'll be in the
NCAA tournament.
Well, yeah, exactly. They're sitting the same way. Well, we're going to need to save it for next week with Butler and those guys because we're going to look at all the conferences next week and break down the top conferences. And my favorite conference outside of the Big East, the Ivy League. Go Ivy!
Ivy League's interesting, but as we've said before, they're only going to have one representative. Yale, I think is 9-0 in conference, but if they don't win the 4-team Ivy League tournament in another month, they're not making the NCAA tournament.
I know, but you got teams like Cornell and Princeton that are 19-4 and 18-3 respectively. 19-4, and I'm going to take the week. If you got some time too, let's take a look at their schedules. We're going to get into, because March Madness is just around the corner, and these tournaments are going to start hooking up, and we're going to get into what's going to be going on. And what did you say about Paige?
Yeah. Let's not sign off without talking about Paige Beckers. I mean, that coupled with what probably even more important than the men's 30-point win over Marquette is we have a whole another season to look forward to watching Paige Beckers play for the girls team.
Yeah.
So she made that announcement yesterday and relieved a lot of her fans and fans of the Huskies. In fact, that she's only played 2.5 seasons out of the 4 that she was eligible for. So since she redshirted a year last season, and she has that extra year due to the pandemic, she actually can come back for the next 2 years, but that's looking ahead too far. But when she made the announcement Friday night that she's coming back, along with Aubrey Griffin, who's had probably an even worse injury history with UConn and with her high school years prior to that in Austin, New York, it's a sigh of relief that she's coming back. And hopefully, God willing, they stay healthy, and she does get to play with her good friend AZ Fudd next year, along with Griffin and the current 4 freshmen who are contributing, and they have 2 more freshmen coming in, all high recruits. And the 2 other girls who were honored Friday night, the senior night, they haven't declared whether they're coming back or not. Since they're both from other countries, Aaliyah Edwards is Canadian and Nika Mules from the Czech Republic. Mm-hmm. The thought process is they're probably going to go pro because they can't collect on NIL, name, image, and likeness money because they're not American citizens. Oh. They're foreign players. So for that reason, that might just push them over the edge and want to go pro.
Well, that could be good news to to American players, because maybe these Canadians and these foreigners will stop coming here to save some spots for them. I don't know. It's another situation where really the NCAA, that's what you're concerned about. That is what you're concerned about. That's what's keeping you up. Right. That's what's keeping you up at night.
It's like, kind of not fair. Yeah.
It's like it's like you can have. I mean, what if Caitlin Clark was Canadian or Australian, and now you're sitting there, and right now what she's done, and I'm not a big women's basketball follower, that, and I'm not, but what she's done for the women's game over the last 2 years, and the attention she is bringing to the game,
to be able to collect on that,
right? And so you would just screw that person because she's from Canada. I mean,
well, until they change that rule, that's exactly what they would do.
Yeah, and it's that minor thinking that have us where we are now with the transfer portal and the NIL. If they had just been generous with these guys before, if they had let them find ways to make money on their name and likeness, we wouldn't be in the crap we're in right now, where good coaches are retiring because they can't take it. They no longer have the authority they thought they had. All this other stuff that's coming up because the NCAA chooses such minutia to be worried about.
It's all greed. And like you said, it just took so long for these players to finally get compensated while the universities and the NCAA are making zillions of dollars. And they finally found a way to compensate these players. And it's still not complete.
No. God, it's still not complete.
They're still getting shorted. But thankfully that, with that I'm sure entered into Paige Beckers' decision to come back. It helped her make that decision. She doesn't have to go out and earn a living yet because she has that income for now.
Well, and the other thing is because the other thing is, I'll guarantee you her money at UConn is probably not equal, but not too far from what she'd be making in the WNBA, because those girls don't get any money at all. So
not enough. Right.
Yeah. So, all right, we're going to call it a day now. We will be back next week. We thank everybody for signing in, and I'm going to put this up on the Facebook pages. It's been on YouTube Live. You can find it at Draught Nite Sports, and we will be back next week to talk to you more about what we believe in. The next week will be all about NCAA basketball. See us.
Sounds
Also, good. Come see us at the Dry Dock on Wednesday night. See how smart that Casey is. He can show up. He can show it off.
I'm not that smart.
All right. Have a good day, my friend. I will see you on Wednesday.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Good to see you.